some of the most overlooked champions when it comes to the Iron Twins Fortress dungeon, the brand new dungeon players get access to for those sweet soul stones to summon from the altar of stones. Let's see which champions those are. What up team, it's your boy MurderInc here. Today we are talking about champions that listen. No matter what champion I say here, as far as underrated, underused, underappreciated, there are going to be players who have been using them since day one. Just because you're using it doesn't mean the entire community is, so just miss me with those comments. I hate starting a video like that, but every time I make one of these, there's always someone that says, I've been using this champion since it came out. I'm sure you have, I'm sure hundreds of players have, but thousands upon thousands of players play this game, so had to get that off my chest at the beginning of this video. So what are we talking about? Like we already said, the champions that have proven and have shown themselves doing amazing things in these dungeons. Now I do kind of want to skip over the more known about ones for this channel specifically, which I mean the first one is quite obvious, and it's going to be, he's an epic, he's Force Affinity, and his name is the one, the only champion I passed already, Geomancer. I'm not going to talk about him too much. Everyone knows how good he is. He's the, without a doubt, no contest, best champion for the Iron Twins Fortress, but people are sick of hearing about it. If you have him, you know how good he is. If you don't have him, you don't want to hear about this for the Iron Twins. So this guy's not underrated. He's not underused. He's not unknown by any means here. The next thing, we're not going to talk about any unkillable champions. Asterix. Why did I say that? Because we're not going to talk about those champions that go into an unkillable team for this boss. Rest in peace, Paragon. Well, I'm going to silence for Paragon, please. Even though it's not live yet, don't worry. It's going to be live soon, and you're not going to be able to use him to do that cheese, which takes like 30 minutes anyway, so thank you, Plarium. But also, if you invested and you 6-starred it, I'm sorry. They should refund and give you chickens for that. But we're not talking about that. So keeping all of that stuff out of the picture here, now that I clarified that, who are some of the strongest contenders for the most underrated and underused champions so far? I know it's early, not a ton of testing has been done, but without further ado, let's start with Aox. If you told me he was going to be one of the best champions for this dungeon, I would have said nah. Nah. 17,000 base HP? Okay. 1100 base defense? That's okay too. 99 base speed? Not the craziest thing I've ever seen. We got champions with 107 now, 109, even higher into the 110 plus area. Nothing crazy. Let's look at his kit. Attacks one enemy 2 times. Each hit has a 10% of placing 5% poison. That's some damage. Not a lot of damage, but he's a support. Right? 10% chance, kind of low. But if you book him, 30% chance. Not too shabby. Not in each hit, so you can place 2 poisons. Okay. Move on. Don't get too excited about the A1. A2. A 3-turn cooldown when fully booked. Attacks one enemy. Heals all allies by 10% of their max HP. Heals each ally by an extra 2.5% for each debuff on the target. That ties into many teams here. They may be on something. 2.5% for each debuff. Let's see. Defense down. Weaken. Attack down. Let's just say 2 poisons. He's the only champion on your team here. Defense down, weaken, attack down, 2 poisons. HP burn. We'll throw in a 6. Okay, so now we have 6. 6 times 2.5. Now we're scaling. That's some serious healing after attacking one enemy. And that's assuming you're not filling up the debuff bar. This can go up even higher. So the scaling on this is fantastic. This makes this guy a really solid healer overall, because it's not a flat heal where if you're stacking HP, which you should be on your champions, the champions that deal linear heals aren't as good, but the ones that scale with your allies' max HP, the value is through the roof because you're stacking HP, or you should be for this boss. So one, beautiful, right? 4-turn cooldown isn't terrible. 3-turn is fantastic once it's fully booked. Moving on to the A3 here, places a 50% attack down debuff on the single target enemy we're talking about. Also has a 75% chance of decreasing the enemy's turn meter, can't be done. Places a 30% decreased crit rate buff on the target for 2 turns if they have 50% or more turn meter after the turn meter decrease. So we have an attack down for sure. What do I like about this attack down? You don't have to book this. You don't. Places doesn't have a chance to place. The booking debuff chance only scales with the 75% chance of placing that decreased turn meter by 20% on the boss. So we can just totally throw that away. We now have an attack down, 3 turn cooldown, lasts for 2 turns, and if you have decreased speed, this should always be up, assuming you don't get 3%ed. Now let's move to his passive here. Increases the duration of 2 random debuffs on the attacker by 1 turn when attacked, occurs once per hit. Once again, occurs once per hit. So there is no cooldown on this. What does this mean? Now, I don't really have to explain that second part to you. As we can see, there's no cooldown on this, so occurring once per hit is very strong since we already know how this Iron Twins boss does in fact work here. So all of these things combined, his whole kit together, with his respectable base stats, makes this guy a huge standout. I'm sure you guys have already seen screenshots here and there. This guy's going to become a lot more popular. I can guarantee it going forward. He is so strong. If you don't have him, highly recommend building this guy and adding him to your team because he just adds so much. Now, the next champion I want to talk about is indeed going to be a legendary, someone who really shined in the Hydra, and that's going to be Lord Chamfort here. We have a defense down on his A1, 45% baseline for an A1 is very good odds. We have an A2 decrease accuracy and decrease attack here. If we're going the resistance route, this guy is a no-brainer here. Then his passive at the start of each turn places a shield buff on this champion equal to 20% of their health. Will place a 15% decreased speed debuff for 1 turn on whichever enemy attacks this champion. 1 turn cooldown. Really good support champion if you have like a 3-turn decreased speed and then you add him in there. If you want to, you can also use this as your only decreased speed champion, but if this gets resisted, it could be problematic. It really could be problematic, so I highly recommend if you do have this guy in, he may be fine, but it's too risky for my liking. If you want to go for it, 100% do it. I would prefer having some type of champion that offers many things on top of a 3-turn cooldown, 4-turn cooldown decreased speed, just in case you have to overlap with this guy. Because as we can see here, it only lasts for 1 turn. Even though it's just a 1-turn cooldown, I still wouldn't risk it. On top of that, amazing base stats, 22,000 base health, 1,000 base defense, on the lower side, but not crazy low like 800. So he scales well with gear, he has good survivability, and his kit is perfect for this boss. The next champion I want to talk about isn't as underrated as the other champions, or it shouldn't be at least. I've talked about him a few times, I've showed you clips of him already. It's going to be Vogoth. Vogoth is a great healer to get you through those bottom levels. You're going to turn this off in the AI if you're using this guy because you're not provoking the boss, which means you're not applying that attack down. And we have a triple hit A1 here. Now, unless you have insane gear, and as an example, not that I have the best gear in the game, but I have really good gear and I didn't even do this. You can build accuracy on this guy if you want to for that 30 up to 40% chance of increasing the duration of 1 random debuff on the target by 1 turn. You can 100% go for that. I didn't do it like I said because that's a huge strain on your gear, and because of this. Whenever this champion is attacked, heals all allies that make him go down by 25% of the damage received from boss attacks. Because this is a boss, this champion only receives half of the heal that all other allies receive. So, this is strong. 25% of the damage received from boss attacks. He has 19,000 base HP. You stack HP on this guy, you get hit like a truck because the boss hits like a truck, and then you heal your team for a ton of damage. No cooldown, so every time it gets hit, he heals. It's just fantastic. When attacked, places a leech debuff on the attacker for 2 turns. Once again, really hard to pull off. Really hard to pull off with a crazy amount of health, making sure he survives, as well as giving him the accuracy needed, especially for the higher stages. The accuracy checks are quite high, so stacking that HP with that amount of accuracy is going to be very, very difficult, like I've said 1,000 times. But Vogoth is fantastic. Now, one thing to know about Vogoth, it matters where you place him in your team. He heals targets based on his position. So he's not going to be as effective if you place him in slot number 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He's going to get hit, and then his heal, it's not going to do much. But if you put him here, he's prioritized to heal instantly. So what do I mean by that? Do I mean if you put him in position 5, he's not going to heal your team? No. He heals when he's hit, and no matter if it's an AoE skill, single target skill, whatever, there's always an order to how champions get hit. So for AoE, like I said, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's just the way it is. It's how it's coded into the game. So if you want to use him as someone to top off your team before they take tons of damage, you put him in slot 1. If you have someone really tanky in slot 1, you can put him in slot number 2. So what happens if he's in slot number 2? He heals 3, 4, 5, and then 1 in that order. 1 gets healed after they take the damage. 3, 4, and 5 get healed before they take the damage. So once again, if you want to top your team off before the incoming damage happens, you want to put him early in the rotation for this setup here, like this. If you want him later in the rotation, you want to put him at the end here. So they take damage, then they get healed afterwards, going into the next rotation of whatever you're trying to pull off here. Now, is there a best spot to put him? No. You have to watch your team and see what happens. If you're falling behind on heals, you may want to consider putting him on the end of the team, so you get a heal going into the next round to help out your other healers. If you're having problems surviving and getting one shot, this is where you have to consider why you're getting one shot. Is it just an overkill one shot? Vogoth doesn't fix anything there. If it's because you're going into the dangerous rounds at low HP already, that's when you might consider putting him earlier on into the rotation here. So as far as what's best, what's worse, it's really opinion based. People can say it's best to put him at the end because it makes sense to them in their head, but everyone's account's different, everyone's champions are different, synergies are different between healers, so I cannot tell you, as someone that's played for this long, that there's a right answer for where you can put him, but it's really important you understand this about Vogoth. I don't see enough people talking about this, and it's really important. So he's a great champion. The next one is our login champion, Grush the Mangler. I've used him in pretty much every single bit of content this game has came out with because this guy's OP. He does not get enough credit here. 19,000 base HP. Defense champion, by the way. 1,300 base defense. Great. Speed, a little bit low. I get that. But what does he do? He has a leech on his A1. His A2 has the ability to be, and this part I get, but people don't like. I'm with you. Decrease attack or decrease crit damage. Can't stand it. Should be both. It is what it is. He's already great, so I can't complain too much. But if you book him, it's a 100% chance up to a 4-turn cooldown once fully booked. It's an AoE, but this is single target, of course. And of course, you're fishing for that decrease attack. But if you're not running decreased crit rate, decreased crit damage isn't the worst thing for a debuff. This means that if you get crit, that unlucky crit, it's going to do significantly lower damage based on damage scaling for this boss. So is it completely useless? No. It has a 15% chance of being viable once it's placed, because the boss, of course, as I've mentioned before, has 15% base crit rate. Moving on to the A3, this one's good. Attacks an enemy, places a continuous heal buff on all allies for 2 turns, placing an additional 7.5% buff on an ally for 1 turn if at least one enemy is hit with a critical hit. So you're attacking the enemy, you can proc War Master, whatever master you have on him, and if you crit, it's 2 continuous heals, 1 strong one, 1 weak one. So big healing potential from this guy between Leech and this A3 here for sure. This guy slept on. He's fantastic for support. So much healing involved between hitting the target and just the raw heals you get. And you have that chance of him putting up something useful with an attack down on the A2. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is an interesting concept, so bear with me on this one. This is what I was talking about as far as the unkillable, and I think my guy's awakened, so I have to scroll to find him. Okay, I still have a +3 tower here. This is something I played around with, and I didn't want to, like I said in a previous video, come out with this until I had this tested. So Rashkard the Tower, and the reason why I'm talking about unkillable champions when I said I'm not going to talk about unkillable teams because they're already good, is because a lot of players, and if you're not doing this, you're doing it wrong, use their unkillable teams for clan boss. Unless it's purely for fun and you have this huge thing against unkillable teams, you probably have it. It's the most popular thing, which means that having 2 separate unkillable teams is not very common. With that being said, you're much more likely to have 1 block damage champion on your team that has a 4-turn cooldown like Rashkard the Tower than you are of having 2 in the other champions and the gear it takes to build an unkillable team for the Iron Twins and Affinity. So why is this so good? What did I find? I found unkillable as opposed to block damage does not work as well for this, so keep that in mind. Block damage works fantastic for this. So what do? You build an auto team, you set the AI to never use this guy's A3. Why do you do that? To condition you into understanding that you're not using this guy to protect your team from dying, which means you have to build survivability on everybody. What does this guy do? If you consider the last video I just released talking about the most common reason people wipe, it's to that bottom percentage. How do you increase your success chance for the bottom health percentages of this boss that does a stupid amount of damage? Have a champion that does solid damage, scales well to survivability, and has block damage. So, like I said, full auto team, turn off the A3. Once you get to 50% health, 40% health, start taking crazy damage, you start to manual. You start to anticipate that really hard-hitting triple hit ability with a 2-turn cooldown. And in the meantime, you have an A1 that hits decently hard, you don't have to worry about removing buffs. Toxic gear, very good for this guy, will scale him in damage, but his A2 hits very hard and also is scaled off of HP, which is what you're going to be stacking on this guy. So now you have a hard-hitting ability on an A2. It applies debuffs in case you have any champions that scale with debuffs. Hint, hint, Aox and his heal. So this guy already has a lot of things going for him as far as the output he can do, and his damage is respectable once you put him in toxic gear. So with that being said, this is why I wanted to include block damage champions, and any block damage champion will work. If it's 2-turn duration, it's good. If it's 1 turn, it's still fine. It's a bit harder to pull off if it is 1 turn because you have to make sure they're last. If they're not last and they use a 1-turn duration block damage buff, as soon as anyone else gets the turn, they're probably going to die if you're really banking on this. But this is the greatest save me button you can ask for in something like this. Why do I prefer this over unkillable? Obvious. You take 0 damage with this. Unkillable, you take the full damage. You'll probably start with 0 health. And unless you have decreased speed and enough time to full heal all of your champions, you're probably still going to be just as behind. You just save yourself 1 turn. This provides you the cushion of taking no damage, healing back up, losing nothing when using this ability, and if you can't pull it off after 2 turns and your champions are slow or fast enough to milk this for 2 turns, it's not the best thing in the world because after 2 turns he's going to use the same ability again, which is going to be the hard-hitting one, and it's kind of GG from there. But if you can use this and this is your burn window and you can survive with this full heal, survive the next one based purely off of survivability, and this now extends your burn window by a whole extra rotation of 2 turns. So I think this is so underrated. I've tested this a bunch of times and it's worked out very well in making that end health very, very consistent for your team. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is going to be a duo combo here. The duo combo is going to consist of 1 champion specifically, and then 1 champion that can beat anybody with another one kind of standing out more than others. So it's going to be the Log and Reward champion, Visix the Unbowed. Visix is good because, not because of the A3, the A2, ally protection, decreased speed. If you've used Visix or any ally protection champion, you know they get destroyed. Visix is going to get destroyed. You're using this to your advantage though. The goal here is you apply decreased speed. This is assuming she's booked. You apply ally protection. You're taking off all of this stress. Now, usually with ally protection champions, they put block damage on themselves. They put increase defense, strengthen, something to help them survive. Visix doesn't have that, and people think it's a bad thing, but it's not a bad thing. Why is it not a bad thing? Because you have to pair this with the Reviver. Not just any type of Reviver. Someone will use Cephii since she's right here. Someone that revives an ally, 55% HP, that part's irrelevant, but full turn meter. This is the key here, because you want to make sure this decreased speed cooldown is up as often as possible. If you're the same speed as the boss, there's going to be one duration turn, assuming you don't get resisted, of no decreased speed on the boss, and that's no good. So who is the power pair? I guess we can call it power couple. Kind of weird, but we'll just say it anyways. With Visix, I've showed it before, it's going to be Godseeker Aniri. She has the passive here that will preempt a fatal hit, placing Revive on death. Very strong, but Rise of Glory revives a dead ally, fills their turn meter, and resets the cooldown on all their skills. Yes, this is a 4-turn cooldown, but once you see it happen once, and you start getting things rolling with your team and survivability, you will see how strong this duo actually performs in the Iron Twins boss, especially once again when you get to those lower health bars and your team starts taking crazy damage from the debuffs you have on you. This is going to be your saving grace on your team. So now that I spent a ton of time going over just a few champions, I could talk about 100 more champions that are really good for this. Valkyrie, another sleeper champion. She's not affected by her passive at all because there's no buffs. And if you stack defense on this, it's just a home run. It's so hard to kill your team when they have a massive shield from Valkyrie protecting them. So like I said, that's not the point here. I can name 1,000 legendaries, epics that do really well. Those were just the ones that really stuck out to me and have been performing fantastic for the players who have been using them already. What I want you guys to do is, like I said, there are tons of champions. Who really stood out to you that I haven't mentioned so far? I mentioned a lot of champions already that you can use. Some people have been using them, but what other ones really wowed you in your testing and your progression? I'm curious to know. I'm sure we would agree on them for sure. So definitely drop me a comment and let me know below, because I'm not going to sit here by any means and say I have this all figured out. While I can name hundreds of champions that will do well, it's possible and very likely that you guys are using someone that's fantastic that I've simply overlooked, so I want to know about it for sure. Maybe it's Rain Beast, haven't even considered it. Maybe it's Sepulchre Sentinel, haven't even considered it. Mausoleum Mage, I know he's good and I've tested him, but there could be some other sleeper champion who's doing crazy well, not one of the obvious champions, you know who they are, but someone that I'm completely overlooking, so I'm curious. In the comments, let me know who it could be. I will be reading them quite often for sure. Alright guys, that is going to conclude my video here today for you all. As always, if you enjoyed this content, smash the like button, subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and I will see you all in my next upload.